Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we're going to be continuing with our series, 7 Secular Advocacy Organizations for Skeptics to Support. In this video, we're going to be looking at the question, what is secularism? Now, secularism is a viewpoint that says that we should limit the influence of religion on various other social institutions. There are a lot of different specific views and phenomena that have been described as secularism. In this video, we're going to distinguish between these connected but importantly different viewpoints. The first distinction we're going to make is between secularism and secularization. While secularism is a philosophical position about limiting the influence of religion on other institutions, secularization is a sociological process where a society transitions from universal, communal religious belief to one of personal, optional religious belief. We're going to talk about both secularism and secularization in this video, so don't worry. Now, to start off, the origin of the word secularism is often traced back to the works of George Holyoake. Holyoake attributes the long tradition of free thought, check out our last video in the series, as an important precursor to secularism, but argued that secularism went further than free thought did. Whereas free thought was simply the right to criticize religious authority, secularism was more than that. It was putting forward a positive project. For Holyoake, secularism entailed a project of an alternative ethical and political system to one controlled by religion, i.e. positing the idea that we could have a government system or a system of ethics that was not solely based in a religious ideology. Specifically, when it comes to ethics, Holyoake argued for an ethical code which included 3 central tenets: that we should improve life by material means, we should be free to use science to do so, and that we should seek to do good in the present life regardless of the impacts on an afterlife. These propositions form in many ways a rejection of some religious teachings that focus on ensuring access to a good afterlife over improving life on earth, and argue that religion should constrain or control the discoveries of science. It should be clear how Holyoake follows both the tradition of free thought that we covered in the last video and was a precursor to modern humanist projects to create a kind of non-religious ethics. It should also be clear as we go through the different kinds of secularism how these ideas that Holyoake presented initially got distilled into some of these different kinds of secularism. So let's take a look at those. A second division between types of secularism is between political secularism and epistemic secularism. Political secularism can take various forms, but often contains 2 primary tenets: that 1, government should not interfere with religious belief, and that 2, religion should not interfere with government. This is most likely the most common thing that someone is referring to when they're talking about secularism. They're talking about a secular government, a government that doesn't interfere with religion, and religion doesn't interfere with the government. With respect to 1, this means that the government should not enforce the rules of a particular religion, such as prosecuting heresy, apostasy, blasphemy, etc., and should tolerate different religious claims and practices. While this is independent from the sociological claim that beliefs are becoming more personal and optional, it should be clear the linkages between a state not enforcing collective singular belief with the personalization and optionalization of such beliefs. With respect to 2, this is often framed as the claim that religious reasons should not be used in enacting or enforcing laws. This is key to one of the core tenets of classical liberalism, the idea that we should be basing our political debate on commonly accepted tenets of reason or rationality, not these kind of contested dogmatic axioms that may differ from religion to religion. And we shouldn't take religious reasons to be reason to provide public funding, or that the government shouldn't make any laws limiting or supporting any particular religious organization over another. Like I said, political secularism is probably one of the key things you will hear talk about when you hear reference to secularism, but you'll often hear reference to epistemic secularism, even if it's not in so many words. Another institution that various types of secularism attempt to limit the influence of religion on is the pursuit of knowledge. This is most often held with respect to scientific inquiry, excuse me. You might hear this framed as scientific secularism. But there are also those that hold this viewpoint with respect to morality and ethics. I'm going to lump all of these claims under the general title of epistemic secularism, the idea that these kinds of inquiries into knowledge are not the purview of religion. With regard to scientific inquiry, this is the claim that religion has nothing to say about scientific inquiry, and that scientific claims should be taught and judged on the basis of science, and not the claims of any particular religious tradition. This becomes a real policy debate when there are questions of whether creationism should be taught alongside evolution in a science classroom. Should evidence from a particular holy text be able to justify the claims of a scientific paper in a peer-reviewed journal? The epistemic secularist says no, and claims that religion should have no part in the teaching of science, and that this is the job of science, not religion, to study the physical world. This is similar, but not necessarily the same as political secularism. Now, in many countries around the world, you have schools that are being run by governments, and so these things end up crossing over in some ways. But this is also the claim that individual private universities and colleges that aren't connected to the government shouldn't be basing scientific inquiry on religious claims, but rather the pursuit of knowledge should be free from kind of religious mandates or religious understandings of things to actually go after the real claims about the world as opposed to trying to conform them to a particular holy text. We can also divide the concept of secularization into two independent trends: personal secularization and atheistic secularization. We'll take a look at both here. Personal secularization is the transformation from a communal relationship with a deity to a personal relationship with one. This is most evident in the shift from Catholicism to Protestantism, which both diversified the set of religious beliefs allowable to Christians, as well as making one's relationship with God a personal one instead of a communal one that required the Catholic Church to mediate it. This movement opened the doors to pushing religion out of governance, as diversity of religious beliefs made consolidation under a single authority impossible, and with a rise in beliefs that you didn't need that authority in order to access truth or in order to access morality, even if you're still accessing those things through religion, but you're accessing those through a personal religion as opposed to an institutionalized religion. It means that it significantly weakens the power of that singular institution, in the past the Catholic Church, that controlled all of those pieces. While many versions of secularism can be seen throughout various faith traditions, this one is particular to Christianity and the Protestant Reformation. Now, once religious institutions stopped enforcing belief through the government, stopped teaching religion through the schools, and stopped having a single authority, it was only a matter of time until people stopped believing. Atheistic secularization, then, is the fact that in industrialized, advanced Western nations, fewer and fewer people are religious every year. For a long time, the United States appeared to be bucking this trend, but recently even Americans have been becoming less and less religious. Various theorists have posited a range of different explanations for this trend. We even have a video on 10 reasons people leave the faith, if you're curious for some personal reasons that might be driving individuals to do this. However, overall, there's one thing that people may be speaking of when they say a society is becoming secularized, and that is this process of, as a country becomes more economically advanced, often it will have fewer and fewer people who are religious. Maybe that's being driven by these other institutions of secularization, or maybe it's just a connection between, as you become more educated, as you become more economically advanced, religion plays a smaller and smaller and less important role in people's lives. Now, some have argued that secularism is a uniquely Christian position, or unique to the quote-unquote Western world. However, others argue that secularism can exist as part of other religious traditions. Take the case of Islam. Some Muslim philosophers have argued that Islam is inimical to secularism because Islam claims to encompass all parts of life, including governance and science. However, others have argued that there is space for secularism in Islam. Abd al-Razak argued that the formative texts of Islam do not dictate a particular form of government, and that Islam in fact encourages the separation of religion and the state. Abdul Karim Soroush has argued Muslims should not hold their governments as sacred, and that politics should be separate from religious dogma and open to critique, something that sounds a bit like secularism as well as a little bit like free thought. Abdullah and Naim has argued that government enforcing a religion is inherently counter to the tenets of Islam, and the establishment of a secular state is actually the most likely thing to allow for a Muslim way of life. Now, it's important to note that these theorists and philosophers exist, but it's also important to note that they are the exception, not the rule, within these societies. And within much of Islamic teachings, there is a belief or argument that secularism is in some way something that is counter to some of the tenets of Islam. The idea that religion should not have a part in government is still virulently contested and requires advocacy organizations to ensure that it is protected. This series is highlighting some such organizations in the US. Secular Coalition for America is a lobbying organization that pushes for new laws on behalf of non-religious Americans and groups that support secular government. Their mission is to advocate for equal rights for non-religious Americans in the halls of Congress. They work with the Congressional Free Thought Caucus, a group of representatives in Congress dedicated to advocating for secular government and the rights of the non-religious. If you care about protecting a secular government in the US, you should consider donating to the Secular Coalition for America or one of the many constituent organizations, such as the Freedom from Religion Foundation, who are running a fundraiser for alongside this video right now. Please do consider donating there, but also do check out the Secular Coalition for America. Even if you don't donate to them, they are a great access point to a lot of other advocacy organizations around the country and with particular interest groups who are working on these issues to advocate for a secular government and political secularism, as we learned about in this video. What do you think? Is secularism something that you support? Do you support it in government, in epistemology, science, and learning? Have you seen the trend towards less religious belief in your country? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Watch this video and more here at Carneades.org, and stay skeptical, everybody.